Hi everyone, I'm super excited to host Nikhil Nagaraj. He's co-founder of Strug, building AI for construction compliance. Thanks a lot for being
Hi,
on the
everyone.
show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Nikhil, take us back to your college days to co-founding Strug. Like, what would be your career highlights?
Oh, okay. I'm originally from India, so I'm actually from the city you're in right now. So I'm from Bangalore. I did my undergrad in sort of electronics engineering with a focus on computer science as well. And yeah, that's kind of where my sort of ML AI journey started. So that's where I first kind of started doing some stuff in machine learning. I did a few internships during that time, focused on ML, and this is all pre ChatGPT days, right? Like that is very, we are now talking about stuff like AlexNet and whatnot. So we are in those times. So which feels very far away because like nowadays everything is about nano banana. But yeah, so we started there, worked a little bit through internships, through projects at university. I studied at IIT Guwahati. And then I moved to Leuven for my master's, where I focused on computer science. I did a master's in computer science, with again the focus being on AI and machine learning. And I think for me it was a lot of fun to look at this field and like just the idea of machines being able to learn and like do some quote unquote smart stuff was very interesting. And that's kind of how I started, right? And then I went into machine learning with my first job, which was at a MLAI consulting firm, which of course pre doing this pre chat GPT, you would do a lot of things from computer vision, structured data analysis. Yeah, of course, a lot of NLP as well. But there was not a lot of focus on, oh, what can the LLM do for me, right? Like you still had language models, but the focus was more broad. Doing that, I worked on projects in structured data, sort of pricing and forecasting, and like projects in computer vision for QA. And was doing while I was doing that in 2022, around November was when ChatGPT came out. And you could see the dramatic shift in just how things changed because all consulting projects and all companies now just wanted something with an LLM. I mean, it did not make sense whether it had any head or tail, but they wanted an LLM. So it was a very interesting phase. But then like towards the end of 23, I actually joined Antler, which is like an early stage venture fund. So I joined their sort of winter, I think they call it winter. Yeah, winter cohort in Amsterdam. So I used to live in Belgium. So I came down to Amsterdam for 3 months, joined the winter cohort, where I met my co-founder, Max. And I had not come into the cohort with an idea of doing something in construction. But of course, I was also not in the cohort with an idea of doing something completely different from what I know, right? Like, so I was going to work on a tech product. It was very unlikely that I was going to work on something that is not technology based. So I was, yeah, kind of not focused on construction, but I was in the cohort with an idea that I want to do something that has some sort of a social impact. Does not have to necessarily be a charity, but like some sort of a social impact, but also like, uses AI, would use all the latest technology to do some cool stuff. Max, and we started looking at areas which like construction, where we were like, okay, what are big problems, right? What are big problems? What can we solve? And then we found, of course, construction crisis, sort of housing crisis is a thing. It's a thing in Bangalore. You ask anybody who wants to live in Indranagar, they'll tell you, like, it's a thing in Bangalore, it's a thing in Amsterdam. So we went through that whole sort of discovery journey of, okay, construction is a problem. Sorry, not construction is a problem. Like construction, there's a housing crisis, there's an infrastructure crisis, and what are the reasons for the crisis was where we started off. And while we were doing that, we found sort of, again, like Max has a bit of a background in prop tech. I have a bit of a background in AI and software engineering. So we kind of found that compliance was a hurdle. Was not the only problem, mind you. There's a lot of other problems as well, like access to labor, access to capital. All of it is a problem, but like construction compliance was a huge issue, which took up a lot of time, which took up a lot of money, resources, wastage, all of that. And we were like, okay, let's try to kind of not solve this. Like, I don't want to be that like a hubris. That was not my name. So I don't want to, not a lot of hubris, but like, we wanted to attempt to at least ease construction compliance. And we started looking at how it goes in the Netherlands, because of course that's where we were based. And at that point, the government had a thing, and even now they have a thing that they want to build 1 million houses by 2030, give or take. So we're like, okay, construction compliance, why is this a problem? So we started talking to people in this industry. We started talking to architects. We started talking to government workers, developers, and all that we heard was this one recurring phrase that compliance essentially is an afterthought. So it basically only takes place when it at the last stage when it has to, right? Like you only look at it. I mean, you sure sometimes you take and have a look over it, but like you mainly look at it during the last phase of permitting, and that's too late because you've already made the decisions. You've already spent a lot of time. You've already spent a lot of resources, money, like people. All of that time has been spent on a project which might not even go through at the end. Forget if it goes through. There's a lot of rework and all. So we said, okay, why is this the case? And then we quickly realized that the way people were approaching compliance was archaic. So there was a lot of sort of, I have like 500 different PDFs in a folder. I'm going to go control F. I'm going to search for certain words. And also these rules were not very easily accessible. If they were spread out in multiple places. There were a lot of relationships which were not explicit. And we thought, okay, this is a very interesting task for AI. And again, like mind you, at this point, we've not really arrived at the fact that we could speed up construction by X%, right? So like we were like, this is a very interesting use case for AI. Let's kind of put something out there and see what people say. So we kind of just started with a very simple RAG thing. And as we started with a very basic RAG system, people were amazed. That also kind of probably tells you something about the industry, right? Like the industry is not very technologically savvy. So people were amazed and like they were like, okay, this is very cool. And this mind you, this was like a RAG on one document. Like so it was not the least lowest effort RAG you can put together. And like people were very amazed and they were like, okay, can you add this? Can you add this? Can you kind of do this? And we realized, oh, wait, there is a huge role, not only to be able to access this using an AI interface, but also just the ability to access this library in one place. There's a huge benefit just to this. And that's how the initial idea for Struck began. So we essentially began as a platform where you could access all these regulations with the vision that at a certain point you would be able to use these regulations to perform real time or pseudo real time compliance checks, right? On your designs, on your models, on your plans. So that's how we started. And we started this in January of 24. And here we are almost 2 years later. The product has grown, the company has grown, and yeah, we are now dealing with compliance in its many forms. So where we started with just a national building code, does my fire exit have to be this? Does my stair have to be this high? Now we are dealing with zoning, planning, all of those things in one platform.
Damn, it's such a like fascinating journey. And I also feel when you like in that phase, prioritization becomes a difficult thing because there's so many things in that problem space you could build features. So curious to know how do you plan?
Yeah, it's prioritization. I mean, I would be very happy. I could say prioritization was a problem. Prioritization was a problem and is no longer one. But it is unfortunately even a problem right now. It's just a challenge, right? It's not a problem. It's kind of a challenge where you have to decide what to do and what not to do. So we have like a few core ideas that we kind of stick by, where we say, okay, look, we are dealing with construction compliance. Anything that is compliance specific or compliance adjacent is what we tackle. So, of course, the technology that we have and the infrastructure that we built could be used for multiple things. But again, if you start chasing everything, you chase nothing, right? So we that's like the first thing we say. If it is not compliance related or compliance adjacent, we don't touch that, at least not yet. And the other thing that we do is we see for everything that we try to build, what is the impact that it can have our users on our existing users and a potential sort of market at large. So can we use this to serve our existing users better? So for example, a lot of our clientele is in the Dutch government space. And so we see if what we are building right now or what we are choosing to build can help them do their jobs better and faster. Does this lower friction for them? And if it does, then it's a big check mark, right? So if it does not help any of our existing users, and we try to avoid building new features just to attract a different market segment, right? Like we want to kind of grow organically. And that's also, I guess, the nature of the industry where you can't just go into an extremely old, extremely sort of deep rooted industry and be like, do it my way now. So you kind of start small and then give people more and more as you build. And that's kind of how we prioritize. So if we can help existing users do more, that feature has more priority than doing something completely new at any point. Yeah.
What is one thing technically it was very challenging to overcome and you're proud of?
I think a couple of things, especially as this sort of just the core technology has evolved, right? So, and I think I remember this thing. There was a lot of videos that Artman does, but there was one sort of thing where I think early on in this whole LLM era, where it was very much what OpenAI was kind of preaching at that point was like, don't build for the models as they are now, but build for the models that come for, which is very smart, right? Because the models have kept on improving. Of course, there are a few things that have not improved, like they can still hallucinate, they can still make mistakes. But of course, the area of hallucination has reduced, the magnitude of hallucination has gone down, and like mistakes have gone down. They become faster, better at reasoning. But of course, there's still problems. But like for us, that is not really something we could tackle. Construction projects are being built today, right? Like I cannot tell somebody that we will deal with your compliance problems 5 years down the line when there's a better model. So then we would pretty much not be solving the problem at all. So one of the technical challenges that we had to really overcome is how do we ensure that we almost never give you something that is factually incorrect. So like it has to be like in across the board, right? So we do a lot more than just giving you answers to compliance questions. There are workflows, reports, GIS applications, which also use AI underneath. So we do not want to give you an answer which is factually incorrect. So that was the hard line, and it is a challenge. I would not say we've completely overcome it, but again, like right now, it is almost impossible to get factually incorrect answers if you're trying it in good faith, right? Of course, LLMs being LLMs, you can always bypass stuff. But as a user, if you're trying to use this in your work, we've eliminated factually incorrect answers, and that I think was a big challenge. And again, like as the models have gotten better, it has become easier to do it. But doing this with a GPT 3.5 is way different from doing this with a Gemini 3, I guess, right? Like, so it's that was a interesting challenge to kind of overcome.
Yeah, and it's would also like to pick your brain because building a RAG model at the early MVP, from that, when you demo it, it's one, but when you start making it in production, then you have to see the like build a system around measuring accuracy and hallucination, and then you start putting the data to the system, then you realize there's a lot of unstructured data, or we have to build systems just for better retrieval. So a lot of that nuances on building labs that are scalable and work in production. If you can share insight, like what are something people don't consider like while building such kind of app?
Yeah. So again, this has evolved a little bit over time. But one thing that I really saw early on, and this maybe came to me a little more naturally because I was doing ML before LLMs were a thing, right? Like because LLMs give you this sort of outlook that, oh my God, this is magic. And it is magic. Like, don't get me wrong. Like it is absolute magic. But there is a lot of like you still have to have like good software engineering and machine learning engineering practices where you evaluate hard and evaluate like properly and have structured evaluation. You have guardrails essentially to allow that, like the model does not go haywire. Because one of the things, especially if you're not running your own sort of small model locally, if you're using any of these closed source APIs, one of the things you run into is that the outputs are non-deterministic, right? Like today it might tell you that you're good, tomorrow it might tell you not so much, right? So, and that is a big problem because like how do you ensure that even though it is non-deterministic, it is non-deterministic in a way that you like, right? Like it should be in that narrow spectrum of what is allowed. So you should really have hard evaluations, like running it multiple times and stuff. And this is something I noticed that people early on were not looking at a lot. But of course, as industry knowledge has evolved, now evals are a big thing, and there are like tons of companies, right, which do this. But I think evaluation, good software engineering practices, and evaluation is just key. Like LLMs are not a way to ignore any of that, right? Like it's a very fast way to get to a, oh, this almost works, but without the good software engineering practices and like you don't get to the final thing. I think there's like a very popular blog by, I think I want to say Simon, where he says good engineering, sorry, good LLM engineering is just good software engineering or something like that. And that's true. That's very true. Like you don't get away from that at all. Like the amount of validation, amount of testing, amount of evaluation that you do, and even just like on the fly validation so that you back off when you know something is off is key.
I also want to highlight, I've seen some incidences where people build their whole app on like a version of GPT, and the new version came and OpenAI decided to archive or just like don't run, and then people were facing issues that okay, now not getting the same quality of outputs.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. But like again, like you don't rely on like one model, right? Like, so if you have a good practice in place, of course, there is a huge difference. Say, for example, if you're using the latest of the model, say, for example, 5.2, which is GPT's latest model, so OpenAI's latest model, if you're using GPT 5.2, the quality of the output that you get in a GPT 5.2, you will probably not get in a Llama 7 billion. That's fair. Again, if you have good practices all around, the difference between a GPT 5.2 and a Opus 4.5 and a Gemini 3 should not be the difference between a 5.2 and a Llama 7 billion, right? Like, and if that is the difference, then you are like your plumbing and your guardrailing is off. There will be differences, of course, but like that is off. And that is also something we used to see if I can replace models on the fly, do things work? They might not work to the exact pinpointed like 99% accuracy that you get from a specific model, but they should not work at a 9% accuracy, right? Like the difference should not be huge. It is a thing, like because I also remember when we were making the switch from say 4 to 4.0. 4.0 was a jump from like 4, and you did get a lot of wins. Like right out of the box, you get a lot of wins, but you also relied on certain things that say a 4 did, and we were like, 4.0 doesn't really do that, does it? Like this is quirk of behavior, like this behavioral quirks you just lose sometimes when these models switch. But yeah, you need to keep testing. You really need to keep testing. There's no other.
Yeah, and this also ties to your previous point on good software engineering. So if your architecture of the app is such a way that we can swap models and maybe also have a backup open source model that in any times when disclosed providers change, that accuracy is always there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, look, there is a lot of discussion on like, whether closed source models, are you a viable company if you build with closed source models? And that is a philosophical discussion and a business discussion which we'll keep aside. But just in the sense of will your is your application robust enough to work and work in situations where one provider just goes away? Is something you should have built in. And it is very easy to do these days because like there are unified interfaces, there are unified ways to access all of these models. So there's almost no reason you shouldn't do it. Almost no.
Nikhil, can you walk us through how your product works?
Yes, yes. So I can, what I'll do is, so there are two parts to the product. One of them is the web application, which I'll share my screen and kind of show you a little bit of. And then we have compliance checks where we essentially look at Revit models and perform compliance checks on those models. So let me share my screen. So yeah, so this is what's called Unravel, right? This is Unravel, and this is the a homepage of the web application. So pretty much if you're any user in the Netherlands, you kind of see this page. And we have a lot of parts, but I'll highlight a few small things, right? So the first one is what we call general regulations, and you can just navigate general regulations, find answers to your questions about height of a stair or like width of a fire exit and all of that stuff, right? Like, and you can look at parking norms and whatnot. Then you have sort of zoning laws, and zoning laws is where you look at regulations per plot, and this is right now only supported in the Netherlands, but we are looking at other countries. But for any plot in the Netherlands, you can look at what the zoning laws say and what is allowed and what is not allowed. And then you have the permit free building checker, which is like a very Netherlands specific workflow where we tell you for every plot how much can you build on your plot and where without a permit. Because again, like if you eliminate the necessity for a permit, you kind of also eliminate some of the workload, some of the costs, all of that, right? So the Netherlands allows certain buildings to be built without a permit, and we kind of tell you how much you can do. I can kind of show you a few interesting things around the zoning, and let me pick an address, right? So I will use an address which I generally use for testing. But here, the reason I show you this address is because it's also faster and don't have to wait. So what we did here is we realized that this is an industry that likes to work in sort of workflows, right? And that's a good thing. Like everybody has their workflows, and this industry has a lot of ossified workflows. And one of the things that they like is reports. They love reports, and this industry, and for good reason, because you want a lot of your decisions to be trackable through time, and a report is a way to track it through time. Like where you store it is a different discussion, but again, you cannot solve all problems in day one. So it's you want to be able to look at reports, and you want to be able to say, okay, what was the decision made and what not. Like simple stuff, the small stuff, right? Like for example, this address has a lot of plans associated with it, but some of these plans are not applicable. Just being able to kind of automatically tell you which plans are not applicable is what we show here is just is just useful because then you do not have to deal with them. You can, of course, ask a question, get an answer, but let's do the interesting thing, right? Let's get a summary report for this location. So let's as this runs, if you get a summary report for this location, this pretty much tells you what can you do at this address, what can you not do at this address, where can you do what, some certain exceptions, because of course zoning laws work a lot with exceptions where they will say something like you can build x meters high, the municipality is allowed to kind of give you a permit if you're like 10% more, right? Like they don't, it's not a long procedure, the municipality has discretion to give you a permit if it's like 10% more or something like that. And that is the interesting bit. So you want these things to be visible to an architect, to a developer, or to a municipality worker, because they are the final arbiters of this, right? Sure, the courts are the final arbiters of this, but in the most common scenario, and like 90% of the cases, the municipality worker is the final arbiter of this. So if they tell you that, oh, you cannot do certain thing, you generally don't try. You generally don't. As a normal citizen or a small builder, architect, you don't try. Of course, if you're trying to reconstruct the whole area, you might take them elsewhere. But this is the idea that we give you a report which will allow you to see exactly what can be done, what cannot be done at your end.
Uh, the polygon which you shared, like, is that like coming digitized from the like how is that data coming?
But like in a way, the Netherlands is pretty advanced there, where they have a lot of digital data available. So, for example, Cadastre, which is the cadastral service in the Netherlands, so plot information, has this data available which you can pull in. But again, all of these data sources are very diverse. Whereas, so to give you an example, like Cadastre gives you plot information. There's a completely different service which tells you if this building, existing building, is a monument. There is a completely
Mm-hmm.
different service which tells you if this is part of an area which is designated as a protected facade area or like a protected cultural heritage, right? So you cannot do a lot of things in areas which are either monuments or cultural heritage. There's a completely different service that tells you what is available already at that location. And there's a completely different service that tells you that these are the rules at this location, right? So it's like a patchwork of data sources, which we kind of break together and kind of allow you to perform operations at like a single spot. So, for example, here what you see as a zoning report for this address is that we tell you, okay, is this a monument? No. Is this a protected village or townscape? No. You also see that different areas have different allowed heights. So you see that here the building height allowed is 4.5 meter, the gutter height is 4.5. So it kind of like, varies at different locations. So you see that on the map. You see what are the zoning designations here. So of course, targeted to the Netherlands, these terms are Dutch legal terms. So you see that this is designated as living, parts of it are designated as garden, and then we tell you what can you do here, right? So we tell you that this is designated as a garden and a portion of it is designated for living, and what can you build, plots up to 100 square meters, what can you do, if it's more than 300 square meters, what can you do, and all of that. So this is information that you as an architect, as a property developer, real estate agent, or a municipality worker can pretty much hand out or use and consume right from the get-go. So you've now waited like what, 45 seconds or something to get this, and you go right from the get-go and you have information at your hand rather than having to kind of go through all of these plans and kind of digest them, read them. And they're not small plans, by the way, like they are massive sort of document, so which you have to go through, right? So that is kind of one of the things we do. And I think this is again the ease of compliance, right? Like you want to kind of make compliance simple, because if it tells you that you cannot build more than X meters high, that is a point blank statement. With a 10% exception, that's a point blank statement. Now and you can go on from there. And the other thing that I was want to talk about, and maybe I will show, is a permit free building checker, right? And this is the little bit of a demo where you get to interact with the map. You kind of get to see what is possible on your plot without a permit. And this is designed to be very simple. So if you look at the questions on the right, it's all basic yes or no, or give me point and click sort of a thing. So is this your location? Yes. Is your building classified as a monument? We tell you that it is not. But in case the data was not up to date or something, you can always change, but we are pretty much right. So you can say next. We also tell you if it's in a protected townscape, it's not, it's good. We tell you to indicate the streets. Again, you don't have to do it. We know this, but we just wanted to point and click. Draw the original main building. So you see that there's a red box already around it, but you can just trace it. I'm going to do this roughly. And then you go, oh, sorry. Then you indicate the front of the building. We ask you to draw any outbuilding that already exists. again, the red indicates that there is something there. You just have to verify that it exists. We show you what the zoning designations are. You can change it, but generally it is correct. And this is a final sort of yes or no, is this everything identified correctly? And then we tell you how much can you build without a permit on this plot and where can you build this, right? So, and again, like the industry loves reports. You can download a PDF because this again allows you to go from the start to the end and then like just work on that, right? So let me try to show you this PDF here. So yeah, this is basically the PDF, and you see that for this address, oh, this is in Dutch. I think I changed the language. But yeah, so you see what we give you some definitions and we tell you how much can you build without a permit and what was the area of the plot, what was the area of the purple thing, and like all of that. So yeah, this is kind of what we do. And what we are going into is more and more of these workflows because we do notice that people like them not just because of the fact that they do stuff end to end. It also reduces the friction in the sense of what they need to know. Because one of the things I found really interesting, and I've seen this for a lot of AI tools that I use myself, is like if I knew what to ask and if I knew what to say, I probably knew what to do. Right? Like there is a very thin line there, and it is not always easy to navigate that line. But like workflows like this walk you through those things, and then you don't really need to know. Okay, if I change this word in my prompt, what's going to happen? Right? So that's kind of what we're building.
This is amazing. Like I must congratulate on like the UI UX because the way you are like proactively recommending rather than like one reactively drawing, it also makes it more like, for lack of a better word, gamified approach of doing these things, and that's very difficult to crack. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like the idea is it has to be frictionless, right? Like as low friction as possible. That's the aim. And we're still working on a few things. For example, we have this automated version of the permit free checker where you can pretty much upload a bunch of addresses or shape files and we'll do all of this for you. But of course, there is the data that we can automatically pull or automatically infer might not be completely up to date, right? So if you've sort of built something in the last 6 months, the aerial images might not be up to date, and that's a bit of a problem. So then you can always go correct. But yeah, so we're trying to achieve sort of a frictionless way to use AI and sort of just good software in this industry. It's fun. It's a very fun challenge.
One of the things I noticed, like there are computer vision layers, and I always like when I was tinkering with training models on like construction details, there's one chain of thought, okay, training on general purpose model or training on your own, like let's say object detection and other models which are like very narrow purpose. So I'm wanted to know how like you are navigating it. Like I guess like for the automatic boundary detection, it has some computer vision layer. So and thoughts on like how you're making those kind of decisions.
Yeah. So like the idea here basically is that if the models out of the box can give you certain useful information, use them. And I mean, it might sound a bit weird, like when you're running AI company, what I'm going to say, but if there are other data sources that you can use without necessarily having to rely on like just a vision model, right? Like that is very interesting. So I'll give you an example, like where I showed you to select the front of the house, right? So again, with an aerial image, it's very hard to detect what the front of the house is. Like, it's almost impossible to do that. But there are a lot of other data sources which give you very good heuristic information on this side might be the front of the house, right?
Um,
So you want to really use that kind of data to say, okay, look, at the end of the day, you are the arbiter. The user is the arbiter of whether it's correct or not. But 9 out of 10 times, I can give you the right front of the house. If you choose to build a complicated house. No, if the house and the situation is very complicated, of course, I mean it's a challenge. But yeah, so in that sense, it's a combination of like using models that are out there and being able to kind of train sort of use case specific models. So I can like in the Q&A side of things, we've trained a few models specifically for the use case of like building regulations. Like we want to know if this question, this answer, if these are correct, if these are not. So stuff like that, right? Like so that we do, but you can never at our scale you cannot train GPT. You
uh,
cannot train a 5.2. You cannot train a Gemini, and you don't have to. We can train smaller models which do the job in this narrow use case for ourselves, right? So that is there. But yeah, we have not really attempted to train general purpose models or like use like or fine tune these general purpose models yet, and that is something we want to look at. But I mean, so many things to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you're building like those workflows where you know the outcome, and like if I also like the approach where using multiple data providers, you can make much more intelligent guess. Like one of the thing when you were sharing is like, okay, maybe if there is a top view and then you have like Google Street View, then maybe you could like make some smart prediction that okay, maybe this part could be, but then like that stitching that architecture and getting those data sources becomes a craft then.
True. Very much so. So I think there's just for the case of the front of the house, right? We've spent a lot of time to do that well because it's an interesting bit where people who've done this for a long time also sometimes struggle with what is the front of the house. Just because it is all so fluffy in terms of how the definitions work. So it does become a craft, but it is also to kind of put it the other way, right? It is also a challenge because this is mainly a problem in the Netherlands. Like it might not be a problem in other countries. So we do spend a lot of time doing this. And again, that comes back to I think the first or second question you asked, how do you prioritize? We do this because the users that we have right now, we see the jump in value they would have, right? So like today we're talking, and I think about 2 days ago, there was a customer of ours who's run like 2,000 addresses through the automated checker. That is 2,000 addresses. This was never possible before. So again, like that is only possible because we kind of do this. But for them, the value unlock is huge. So right, like that is kind of how we also prioritize. But yeah, it becomes more of a lot of AI work even on the LLM side and a lot of AI work on the non-LLM side. Sometimes it becomes more of a art craft thing than an exact science, which is
Yeah.
both fun and annoying. Let me just say.
Yeah, because like it could be possible that okay, you're making this for Netherlands, maybe UK has no zonal requirements for front of the house. So there might be few modules you might prepare for the app, which might not be complete swappable with new zoning and they are like geography. But that's why it's so difficult.
Yeah. But that's also the challenge of the AEC industry, right? Like you have very few sort of global players, right? Like you have like, I mean, of course, your Autodesks, Procourse, all of those aside, like you have very few sort of like truly global AEC tech players, right? Because this is the challenge. Every country likes to do it in its own way. And I mean, funnily enough, even regions within the country like to do it their own way. They're all, they all feel like they are everybody special. And you've got to work with that. Like there is no way around it. You can't force everybody to work in a single way, and that's just not going to work. Yeah.
And like one thing I got also uh, interested to know that like the first demo, like there are multiple plays for this product. It can go B2G, it can go B2 like B2C. How are you thinking about it?
I mean, our vision essentially is to create a product that works across all of these domains, primarily because compliance is an issue that touches everyone, right? And the way I like to put it is, look, if the government uses your product, if the government uses Truck and uses Truck to verify compliance at whatever level, right? Like it might be for everything, it might be for 8 out of 10 things, it might be for 7 out of 10 things. If the government uses Truck to verify compliance, there is no reason the applicant, the architects, the developer should not use Truck because at that point it becomes an open book exam, right? Like one of the biggest problems in construction. This is where like every party will tell you that you never get to a first time right? Like a first time right is almost like a blue moon kind of a thing, right? So can we get to, if not a first time, right? Can we get to a second time, right? Can you use Truck on your side to verify if what you are doing is correct? And the government also uses Truck to verify if what you've done is correct. Can we align that? Can we bring that together? So that is kind of our vision for this to see if we can bring these two sectors together and kind of work together on this. But again, of course, you're not going to, I I feel like a broken record, but like this is an ossified industry with its own deep-rooted practices, right? So you don't do this in a day. You kind of slowly kind of, show people value, they will adopt it, and then you kind of bring this. So we try to do both those plays, like the B2B, B2G play. But for us, the vision essentially is that if you use Truck, and you're dealing with construction compliance. If Struck says you're compliant on one side, Struck says you're compliant on the other, that means the process should be faster. It just should be faster, right? Like that is where we're going. And we see a little bit of that. For example, we have firms, architects, people, developers who send permit-free reports generated by Struck to the municipalities, and they are like, "Oh yeah, we use the same thing. Go on." So it works at certain levels, but of course, maturity is still needed, right?
Nice. Also was like it gave me like the Dropbox like virality factor where if you're sharing, let's say a struck report and built-in logo and everything is there, all the players seeing that, okay, what is this platform? Maybe next time I could try it.
Yeah. That's the idea, right? Like you also want that to be there because it is by nature the industry is very fragmented, right? Like everybody works in their own little bubbles. Maybe there are associations and like for like professional associations, but beyond that, people kind of work in their own bubbles. So that is one way. Like the reporting is one way to say, okay, look, we exist. We might not solve all your problems. We can solve some of them.
Yeah. Ideal scenario will be like a struck branded report. If it's already, then they already know that, okay, it has done.
Exactly. I mean, it's as they say in the आपके मुंह में घी शक्कर. So at a certain point, we'll probably get there, but it takes a while.
Nikhil, like you were not from AEC industry, you're building product in AEC. So for listener watching who are not from the industry and trying to learn about the industry, because like the terminology and the complexity is so big, and especially if you're coming from software background, like there's like software architecture, building architecture, and then so how do you like what's the piece of advice for someone who wants to build product in the space and doesn't have the AEC background?
I think like I mean I've also been like whoever is listening like do take this with a grain of salt because I've only been doing this for 2 years. It's not a long time, but like the one thing that I would say is like go deep and like pick up knowledge wherever you can. And one thing I have to say, and this is a very pleasant surprise, people in the AC industry are very willing to help. Like if you approach it the right way, they are very willing to help. I mean, none of what we've built would have been not possible without like all the help from experts in this field, like just selfless help, right? It's not that we have like, we are paying people to sit down with us. It's just selfless help because they saw that, the industry could use this. They were like, yeah, come on, like let's talk. And like I can tell you where you're wrong or I can tell you where you're right. And I can tell you what is helpful and what is not. And especially like the people on the field, right? Like the architects, the contractors, the developers, the builders, the government employees who are doing this every day, they are very generally very helpful. Like they will, if you ask them nicely, I guess, they will generally help you out and they will tell you where you're wrong. And some people love to tell you where you suck, by the way. Like, which is also good because you do need to know where you suck. Where your knowledge stops is something you need to know. But like the advice I would give is go deep. Like the industry has a lot of nuance, has a lot of terminology, there's a lot of jargon, which if you don't get can make this a huge struggle. So it's a process. I'm still going through it, by the way. By no means am I here to say that I know everything that is there. Like even today, like I'm surprised by certain clauses in the regulations that turn on. I'm like, oh, I never knew this. But again, at this point, it's gotten to a point where if it is obscure enough that it only happens like one in a few hundred times in real life. But again, when you find out about it, you're like, oh, okay. Apparently, this is the one in the hundredth time that you that this happens. Yeah, it's very interesting. But like, do ask for help, and they're willing to help you generally.
Yeah. Yeah, like be humble, absorb all the knowledge, and just ask it.
Yeah,
We have
just
a
ask.
fun rapid fire round where you have only less than 10 seconds to answer and you keep it super brief.
Okay,
What's your favorite restaurant?
Indian food anywhere.
City or country which is in your travel bucket list?
Iceland.
Your role model?
I don't know. I don't know. It's a very hard question, but like different people, different times.
Any book which made a big impact in your life?
Yeah, hard thing about hard things. Horowitz.
3 words your co-founder would describe you as.
I know he'll listen to this. So annoying, does not speak English, does not speak Dutch, and I think friendly.
I say,
Lovely guy to work with, but like yeah, I'm just kidding. But annoying, does not speak Dutch, and friendly.
I see. What is one thing you wish you would have done differently?
No, I think specifying it to the startup, it would be going way deeper, way early on in terms
Mm.
of knowledge gathering.
Piece of advice to your 18-year-old self.
Life's good and you're privileged.
All right. Nikhil, anything which we didn't cover in this interview and you'd like to end on a closing note?
No, I think it was a very fun interview and a nice conversation. And I think like I would just like to add to what I mentioned in terms of advice to people who want to build in this space. It's a challenging space, but it's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding when you do it. So don't be scared. It can be very intimidating because again, ossified industry, a lot of people with a lot of experience, but people very much willing to help. That is very nice.
And it will test your patience a bit.
A bit is stretching it. It will test your patience a lot, mind you. Like that's there, but still a lot.
Awesome, Nikhil.